we have, actually, he is a physician, and he is Dr. Young.
Dr. Robert Young. He calls himself DRGO. Is that what we understand, Doctor?
Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you. We call ourselves DRGO.
DRGO, okay.
We're not trying to be cute because that is the acronym for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership.
Great.
Absolutely.
So tell us about your organization. How did DRGO get started, and you're kind of swimming upstream a little bit here when it comes to most medical practitioners, isn't that right?
And proud of it too, Bill. We got started in 1994. Our founder and until recently director, Tim Wheeler, an ears, nose, and throat doctor in California, was one of the people who testified at the House Appropriations Subcommittee that led to the adoption of the Dickey Amendment, which you may have talked about it at times. That's the amendment that prohibits the CDC from issuing anti-gun propaganda. It does not prohibit it from funding research. That's a canard that has been perpetrated by the anti-gun lobby for many, many years. And that is because he uncovered a lot of propaganda and documented it on the part of the CDC. So being concerned about this whole attitude on the part of the medical profession then, he formed the group. Through the years, a lot of people have contributed. I am now the editor for it, which means the things you see on our website go through me. Our project director is Dr. Arthur Prisbinda. You don't have to pronounce that or spell it. It's tough. And we have a number of other people involved. We have several other people in leadership. And we have several thousand members across the country who believe, as we do, that science needs to be respected. And the 90% of the studies you see published in medical journals are not published because they're good science. They're bad science. They don't stand up to almost any scrutiny, superficial or otherwise. And, of course, as you're aware, they uniformly argue that guns are bad and that they need to be restricted. But their own research does not really truly justify that. And, of course, there's a lot of good research out there. One not long ago by one of our members, and a lot by people like John Lott, Gary Kleck, Gary Mauser, who's a member and writes for us sometimes, and a number of others, mostly in the economics and criminology areas, which, I'm sad to say, my profession does not seem to read. That's it in a nutshell, and we're continuing to fight that fight through criticizing those studies. That's really our primary contribution to the 2A community, which what we do can be used by anybody. We also speak. We do interviews, obviously, with anybody who wants to talk to us. We've contributed to amicus curiae briefs at all levels of the court system, including Emerson, Heller, McDonald at the Supreme Court. I've recently consulted to the Women's Defense League of New Hampshire in their fight against some terrible gun laws coming up. Have testified before the California State Legislature, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I live here in New York. The director lives in Southern California, and we do everything we can in the context of our full-time medical practices, too.
Yeah. Well, Doctor, some of these shootings we've had, now, of course, since you and I have been talking, you were at our Gun Owners of America New York meeting last month, and since that's happened, we had, I think, 3 more shootings. 3 more cold-blooded murders by these psychos. Would you happen to know or be able to give us, our listeners, some kind of an evaluation of these shooters? What do you call them? Psychopaths? I mean, is there some type of terminology that you would give for 2 or 3 of these madmen that go in there and murder innocent people like that? I mean, what kind of a person would do that?
Well, one can't say for sure without knowing the person. Obviously, they're all criminals. That's the largest way to discriminate people who shoot other people, other than for self-defense, from people who don't. And that's enough. Our system is well set up to make those judgments. Beyond that, I think particularly people who engage in mass shootings are quite alienated, very likely sociopaths. Certainly the young people who are doing it, I think it's a particularly sad thing because through your teens and 20s, you're still developing in your cognition and your judgment. And they're doing things that it's possible later they wouldn't. I think there are always a number of reasons, a number of triggers for those things. But the key is to pay attention to the signs and the signals, and there are almost always those things being given off. I think one of them recently may have been triggered by believing that his parents were just about to have him committed somewhere. The recent classic example, of course, is the Florida shooting in Broward County, where so much knowledge was there about the unbalanced young man. So many calls were made to the authorities by so many people, and because of the school's wish not to develop a bad name for itself by calling the police on its own students, and because of the sheriff's department, which, as it's now coming out, had been very lax, this guy was left to end up doing something very terrible. I think that's a classic example of how, when the system goes wrong, you can't count on anything, and it's got nothing to do with anybody who legally owns firearms and is responsible about them. There are bad apples in the barrel.
Yeah, well, in that, like the Parkland case, before the blood was dry on the floor, these poor kids were cold-blooded murdered by this psychopath. Well, I'm just using that as a general term here. The Democrats were using it for political reasons, blaming the NRA, as you know, and blaming Republicans for it. Before the blood was dry, these Democrats.
They're shifting the blame from where it should lie to everyone else because they don't want to get saddled with the blame.
And then we find this out later that Obama's policy that he forced on the school systems was we don't want these kids having felony records before they're out of high school. Trying to stop that. Basically, he was protecting. What he was outright doing was protecting the blacks in the inner cities from getting these criminal charges and having felony charges on them before they get out of high school. That's what he was doing. He's running cover for them. And
exacerbating the Lakeland shooting too was the despicable media coverage, particularly the CNN. Quote town hall, using finger quotes on that, which basically was exploiting the deaths of these poor, unfortunate young people for ratings, so that they could have some anti-gun Nuremberg rally. I think that was one of the worst aspects of it.
Yeah,
and one of the star performers at that was the Broward County Sheriff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In Lakeland, Colorado. I think that was very revealing because the plan of action for the anti-gun groups is always to jump all over these events and pretend that anything they offer could change anything, while all the people on our side of it who have absolutely nothing to do with any of this get blamed. And I was so impressed to see that those students walked out on them accusing them rightly of politicizing their plight and their plight and their losses. So that I hope that's a bit of a turning point in the public interpretation of that sort of reaction.
Yeah, the Democrats are so desperate.
Let me add. Let me make a note too here on our behalf. DRGO is absolutely nonpartisan. Now we certainly see the generally large difference between conservatives and quote progressives in their positions on guns.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's also remember that the great majority of school shooters have been turning out to be white. Now, the problems in the urban, poor, and often ethnic communities, be it black or whatever, are very much due to something else. These are drug and urban gang problems. They're whites. There are a lot of blacks who get victimized, too. People like Madge Toure are doing wonderful work in sensitizing the black community to its own need to arm themselves for protection against the bad actors in them. So there are a number of threads to the overall problems of gun violence in this country. And it's very, very important to look at each particular thing separately, because this one-size-fits-all solution of the anti-gunners, take away the guns, is the one thing will absolutely not work. We've noticed here in New York, after the SAFE Act, and in Connecticut, after their outlawing ARs, New Jersey outlawing supposed large magazines, the compliance with the laws and turning these things in, or registering them even, has been very close to zero. So no one will ever get rid of any number of guns in civilian hands in this country. That is an absolute non-starter, and we must look for other solutions.
Well, Paloma Capana, our Second Amendment attorney, she said to say hi to you, by the way. So she was on with us last week. Anyway, she said that basically we should do a lawsuit on the SAFE Act when they passed, and they forced us to register these AR-15s, real semi-automatic rifles, sporting rifles. They were forced to. That they only had our lawsuit. We won that lawsuit against the governor and the state police. Showed that they had about a 4% compliance. Only 4% of the people of the state of New York registered these rifles, these sporting rifles. So they basically told the governor to take a hike. We're not interested. We're not going to register our guns.
That's not unique to New York either. That also happened in Connecticut and New Jersey.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah, so that's not going to happen. We the people are not going to allow that. So what we need to do, obviously, both for principled reasons and practical reasons, is solve the particular problems of shootings and criminal activity of all sorts, suicides, and of course they ignore the fact that a lot of homicides are actually justified. Those are good things, and people should be, I don't want to say proud or happy, but they're doing the right thing when that happens.
Yeah, protection.
If I'm not mistaken, Doctor, isn't it true that especially the current crop of young people are having a harder time coping with life than in the past?
Well, it does seem that way. I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because, of course, every generation coming up seems that way. There are a lot of reasons. Maybe it's getting worse. The rapid, much more rapid change nowadays than there used to be in terms of society, culture, and particularly technology, which seems to drive a lot of that. Trying to keep up with more things at once socially through those means, when all we had were dial telephones and in-person encounters 50 years ago. In school, I personally have noticed my seventh grade daughter is learning stuff that I didn't get into until high school, around 1970. So there is a lot more pressure to accomplish sooner, sports and things start in first grade. I don't think that youngsters' neurological and mental capacities have changed substantially since our youth. So I'm afraid that there are more pressures. There's certainly more violence being depicted. That's a huge issue. And there's very good work to show that the more kids experience TV or video game violence, the more likely they are to act aggressive. The media industry really wants to soft play this, but it is true, and that's a big problem too.
Yeah, well, it's
a lot of threads going on that add up to some bad things.
Yeah, in popular culture, there's a normative effect to seeing all this stuff, and the kids never see the actual real-world consequences of, for example, aiming a grenade launcher at somebody in a video game and seeing what the result of that is. It's not just an opportunity to score. I also think there's a big role in social media, which, of course, is, talk about inculcating kind of a sense of a normative narcissism. These young people, in some cases, have 3, 4, 5 websites devoted to themselves.
Yeah, that's unusual. I don't know that correlates, of course, with who becomes a mass shooter, but I think that's another good point, saying how much the world has changed in setting its setting peer social expectations in ways that we adults don't really understand, and it's hard for us to keep up with. And we've got to guide our children. That's the ultimate solution for everything bad in the world. Good parenting.
Yeah, Doc, you said you have a 7-year-old, or she's in 7th grade?
7th grade.
She's in 7th grade.
7th grade. Okay.
She's 13. I've got an 8-year-old boy. Yeah.
Okay. Now, are they being taught any kind of ethics, morals, basic life principles on how to get along with your neighbor, how to treat people, or say the 10 Commandments, basic 101 sandbox 10 Commandments or not? Are they getting any of that stuff in your schools? Have you noticed anything like that?
Oh, okay. Thanks for adding in your schools. I thought you were beginning to worry about me, Bill. Yeah, of course they're getting that at home.
Yeah, in the schools.
We attend church. That's a very important part for us. But we are lucky. We are in one of the best school districts in New York. It's Honeoye Falls, Lima.
Oh, okay.
And we're thrilled with that. It's just by chance. But yes, they have a very strong emphasis on treating people right, how to attend to and manage your feelings in a very supportive, positive way, not disciplinarily. And in our little area here, we see a lot of great young people. But still, it's primarily up to the parents. It's not just, you can't leave it up to your school. I don't care where it is or what it is. We have our daughters in Girl Scouts. We have our son in Cub Scouts. We're doing all the things that we can in addition to our own teaching and example as a couple and parents to put our kids with good kids doing good things in the world and to model for them the things that we want them to grow up knowing is right. That is all very important.
Yeah, you made a reference or two in there that I heard, Doctor, that indicated you're about my age, because I was in high school. I graduated in '68. But, I mean, back then, the norm was that you were taught that you derived your place in the world through accomplishment, and that you're not special simply because you exist. And also, parenting was very active and was very evident in most cases. Not all, obviously, but in most. And I swear, I run into kids. I've got a high schooler in Brighton right now. I run into kids all the time. I swear they've never heard the word no.
Yeah, that's a great school district, too. But I think that there has been some extra emphasis on enhancing self-esteem, period, not
Right.
necessarily through accomplishment. That can be a real good thing. And there are kids who aren't very accomplished who still need to think well of themselves, obviously. But I think more so when we're talking societally, we've seen a huge upswing in the number of single mother and even worse, multiple father families. We've seen a lot of those fathers in particular get into criminal activity. We've seen a lot of drug use in our inner cities. It's also in our rural areas. It's also in the areas you and I are talking about where we live. It is truly all over. So all that is far, far different from us old guys who grew up in the 60s.
Doctor, even in regular families, you have the so-called helicopter parents that are never home because they're all working.
Helicopter parents means that parents who are always hovering over their children.
Yeah, and snowplow parents too. They bulldoze a path for their kids so that they never encounter any disappointments or defeats, which is very deceptive. It's not a good thing to do. Doctor, you also mentioned a very important factor, and that is attendance at church and belonging to organizations such as the Scouts who attain to a higher purpose, because it's very important for these kids to believe in something bigger than themselves and to develop faith and a positive outlook. And you don't just get that, through popular culture and attending school.
That's right. Some schools you get a lot of it. You do not get that in popular culture at all. The days of the good hero winning handily and clearly over the bad villain are pretty much done in popular culture. That may be a little bit more realistic, but it doesn't demonstrate for kids that good will prevail. So yes, all these things have mattered a great deal. Yeah.
Now, Doctor, you're going to be, hopefully, we didn't finalize it, but you'll be at our Gun Owners of America meeting, New York, at the Eli Fagan meetings we have on the third Tuesday, and we were trying to get you targeted and to give a speech and give a presentation that third Tuesday of July. I don't have a calendar in front of me to see what the date is, but third Tuesday of July. Yeah. Do you think you can make that one still, I hope? You can make that?
I believe so. Let me just check. That'll be the is that the 18th still?
Yeah, sure. I got something here. All right. That would be the Tuesday, the 16th of July.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at June. Right.
Tuesday, the 16th of July.
Yeah, I will be there.
All right, so
be there. Very pleased. Yeah.
So you'll have a presentation for us. So, folks, if you can, make it to that meeting, July 16th, at the Eli Fagan American Legion on Middle Road. About 7. We're there from 7 to 9. That's Gun Owners of America, New York. And hopefully the doctor will give a beautiful presentation and cover all these angles, what's really going on.
Now, not a doubt in my mind, Bill.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask real quick. Dr. Robert Young, by the way, is our guest here on Second Amendment Radio. Doctor, do you have to be a doctor to belong to DRGO?
No, not at all. In fact, if I may, let me mention a couple of things.
Yes.
We are largely intended to be able to represent the voice of healthcare people, healthcare providers who did not buy into the false propaganda of the anti-gun elements in our profession. That's probably most of them, to be perfectly honest. The great majority certainly don't want to be allied with that stuff. But you don't have to be. We appreciate anybody's support. You can join for $35 one time. We haven't even gotten around to asking for annual memberships. We're a very low-rent organization, all volunteer. The other very important thing we do is under 2ADOC, 2ADoc.com. If you're looking for a healthcare provider who is sympathetic to your 2A rights, who will not quiz you about guns, who will not try to tell you, who knows a lot more than them, what to do about guns, like get rid of them, or you have to store them in only one way, or how dangerous they are even to have in your house, which done right they aren't, of course. They make you safer. Please check out 2adoc.com. For the last year or two, we have been collecting names of healthcare providers who want patients like you. And we know of healthcare providers all across the country who would like to serve you in that fashion. Now, we may or may not have somebody in your neighborhood, but if you ask, we'll let you know what the options are as near you as we can. This is a great opportunity for healthcare providers, too, of course, particularly primary care people. So we really would like to encourage people to check that out as well.
I have a standing joke with my general practitioner, doctor. By the way, the practice is in Honeywell Falls, ironically. And she asks me in my annual physical, all these questions. Do you feel safe at home? The usual statutorily required asks. Anybody hurting me, et cetera. And I say, yeah, just Andy Cuomo. But she gets done with the questions. I look at her. I say, aren't you going to ask me if I have any guns in my home? And she says, okay, do you have guns? And I said, none of your business. And then we have a big laugh. But
and that's the right attitude. So you've got a good one there.
Yeah, I do. Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's fine. Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor. One thing in closing here with you is, you've mentioned the NRA, and you've been involved with the NRA, and so have we in the past. The NRA has taken the heat for most of these gun outright crimes or these cold-blooded murders. The Democrat Party in this case, I'm mentioning them because they're the ones promoting it, bad-mouthing the NRA. The NRA, folks, NRA members, the NRA has had zero involvement with these mass shootings. Zero. So pass the word around anyone you talk to.
Right.
They're not responsible for any of these shootings. Zero.
Never heard of an NRA member doing that. Now, I was just at Indianapolis, which was a very exciting meeting, but there was zero excitement about criminal activity or shooting.
Yeah, isn't that something? With all those gun people, nobody got hurt, nobody got shot.
It's amazing.
Isn't that something?
I felt very safe.
Yes.
I'll bet some of them even have semi-auto, God forbid.
Yeah, those sporting AR-15 style guns, those deadly black rifles.
You gotta watch out. They'll sneak right in your bed and shoot you in the middle of the night. If you don't watch them.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Doctor, for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you. Godspeed. Appreciate all that you do. That's DRGO, Dr. Young. Thanks.
Okay.
Take care. Have a good day.